The rain hit like shards of glass, cold and relentless, hammering down from a sky so dark it felt alive. Luna ran. Her small feet slipped in the mud, each step a struggle, each breath a labor. She could hear it, the snapping of twigs behind her, the rustle of leaves that shouldn't have moved. She wasn't sure if it was the wind or if something was chasing her. Every shadow stretched long, twisting in shapes her mind screamed might be monsters. And maybe some of them were. Her hair plastered to her face, dripping into her eyes, stung. Her fingers gripped something small, something that gave her a flicker of comfort, a talisman worn smooth from constant touch. She didn't know why it mattered, didn't know why a small object could make the terror in her chest ease, even just a little. But it did. It made her feel she wasn't completely alone. The forest was unrelenting. Trees clawed at her arms, their branches snapping like brittle bones. Mud clung to her legs, sucking at her shoes with every desperate step. She stumbled and almost fell, tasting the bitterness of wet earth on her lips. Panic clawed at her chest, icy and tight. She didn't dare look behind her. She didn't dare stop. And then suddenly she found it, a cabin. Abandoned, decrepit, the kind of place most kids would have run screaming from. The door hung off its hinges, splintered wood jutting out at strange angles. But to Luna, it was a sanctuary, a fragile shield against the storm and the hunters she couldn't see but could feel pressing closer. She slipped inside, pressed herself against the wall and shivered. The floorboards groaned beneath her small, trembling body, echoing through the hollow cabin like distant footsteps. Outside, the wind tore at the trees and the rain hammered the roof, making a rhythm that matched the frantic beat of her heart. Her palms tingled. Not from the cold, not entirely. Something else hummed under her skin, a pulse she didn't yet understand. Tiny sparks, like whispers of silver fire, danced at her fingertips whenever she touched the rough wood of the cabin walls. She pulled her hands close to her chest, eyes wide, breath shallow. She had always known she wasn't like other kids, but this power, small and fragile, terrified her as much as it comforted her. The voices came first as murmurs, carried faintly by the wind. Names. Her name. Each syllable sent her heart into a faster, more frantic rhythm. She ducked lower, pressing her face into her knees. Please, she whispered to the empty cabin, to the rain, to anything that might hear her. Please let them not find me. She remembered the pack. The elders. The whispers in the dark about how dangerous she was. How she shouldn't exist. How she could be claimed or worse, destroyed. The thought made her knees shake so violently she felt the floor tilt beneath her. She had no trust left. Not in anyone. Not in herself even. But still there was a tiny, stubborn part of her that believed. Maybe, just maybe, there was someone out there who could see her, really see her, and not recoil. The howl of wolves pierced the storm. Distant but unmistakable, sharp enough to slice through her fragile sense of security. Her chest tightened. Not just any wolves. Pack wolves. And not just any pack. The ones who had called her cursed, dangerous, unworthy. The ones who would take what they believed was theirs. And yet, she felt it. A pull, faint but undeniable. Something in the storm, something in the wildness, something beyond the fear that told her she wasn't just running. She was hiding. She was surviving. She was waiting. She pressed herself into the corner of the cabin, cold seeping through her wet clothes, teeth chattering, and whispered to herself over and over, I will not be taken. I will not be theirs. Not yet, not yet. The rain intensified, the wind howled louder, and the shadows danced across the broken walls of the cabin like living things. And through it all, those tiny sparks in her hands flickered brighter for a moment, as if acknowledging her defiance, her will to survive, her stubborn, impossible hope. And then a sound. Not the storm, not the wolves. Something else. Something closer. Footsteps, heavy, measured, cutting through the chaos. Luna froze. Every instinct screamed at her to run, to hide, to disappear into the mud and the dark forest. But something told her to wait. Something told her that whoever, or whatever, was coming this time might not be like the others. If your heart is racing right now, if you're gripping the edge of your seat and feeling every heartbeat alongside hers, don't stop here. Stay with her. Watch. Because Luna's story isn't just about fear, it's about fire. About power. About being chosen even when you've sworn you never would be. And if you love stories that make your heart race and your soul burn, subscribe to Anne's Romance Collections. Every tale here will pull you into another world, where danger and desire, fear and hope, dance together in ways you won't forget. The storm raged. The cabin groaned. And somewhere in the shadows, the first stirrings of fate were moving toward her. The footsteps came again, deliberate, heavy, measured, cutting through the storm's chaos like a knife through silk. Luna pressed herself tighter against the cabin wall, her wet hair clinging to her pale cheeks, her small body trembling. Every nerve in her tiny frame screamed at her to run, to vanish into the shadows she barely trusted. But something about the sound, it was different. Not a predator's hiss, not a pack's hunting cry. It was human, yet it carried the weight of something ancient and powerful, something she didn't understand but could feel stirring deep inside. A shadow moved against the broken doorway, tall, broad, impossibly calm amidst the storm. Even through the blur of rain she could see it, the Alpha. The richest, most feared Alpha King in the lands she had only whispered about in her mind, in stolen moments when fear gave way to longing. He was enormous, yes, but it wasn't just size that made her pulse thrum. It was the way he carried himself, like the world had given him everything and yet demanded nothing. Every step he took spoke of authority, command, and an unshakable presence, the kind that made you feel simultaneously terrified and inexplicably safe. "Luna," he said, voice low, deliberate, and yet soft, as if her name were something fragile he wanted to hold with care. Her chest tightened, fear twisting with something she didn't want to admit. Curiosity, fascination, a spark that made her stomach twist. How did he know her name? Had he been watching her this whole time? Every whispered warning from the elders, every accusation that she was dangerous, every shadow that had loomed over her life, seemed to pale against the force of him standing there, calm in the storm, unshaken by the chaos that had nearly drowned her. She wanted to scream. She wanted to hide. She wanted to run. But her legs refused to move. Her eyes, wide and luminous, could only watch as he stepped closer, the rain clinging to him in a strange, almost reverent pattern, as if the storm itself respected him. He held out a hand, not in threat, not in dominance, but in an offer. And in that gesture, so simple, so human, Luna felt something awaken in her chest, a faint flame that had nothing to do with the silver sparks that danced in her palms. She wanted to trust, wanted to hope, but fear still tightened its claws. "You don't have to be alone," he said, voice careful, yet carrying a weight she couldn't yet measure. "I've been watching. Waiting. I know who you are. I know what you can do." The words sent a shiver through her, equal parts awe and terror. She didn't understand him, not fully. She didn't understand what he wanted, what he expected, or why the thought of being in his presence made her pulse pound against her ribs like a drum. He moved closer still, scanning her with eyes that seemed to see every fracture, every wound, every flicker of fear and defiance. They were eyes that carried storms of their own, haunted, scarred, a lifetime of battles that he had survived but that had marked him in ways Luna instinctively recognized. She could see the shadows in him, the burdens he carried, and somehow in that recognition she felt understood. He crouched slightly, closer to her level, and there was a tension in the air that made the rain feel warmer, heavier, charged. He reached out again, brushing a strand of wet hair from her face. The contact was fleeting, yet it sent electricity through her, the kind that made her stomach knot and her heartbeat stutter. She smelled him then, the rich, raw scent of earth and rain, and something wild, something undeniably magnetic. Her body reacted in ways that made no sense for a 7-year-old, yet every instinct screamed that this man was connected to her in ways even she couldn't name. "You're not like the others," he murmured almost to himself. "You don't belong to them, and yet, you belong somewhere." She wanted to ask where. She wanted to argue. But the words stuck in her throat, tangled in fear, longing, and confusion. Instead she watched, frozen, as he straightened again, a silhouette against the storm, formidable yet protective. Then came the food, placed carefully before her, warm, nourishing, and offered with a gentleness that seemed impossible for a man of such strength. She took it, her small hands brushing his. The contact was brief, but it left her palms tingling, sparks of her silver flame flickering brighter as if responding to him. Her eyes met his for just a moment, and in that glance, a silent communication passed between them. He saw her. All of her, fear, defiance, power, and vulnerability. "I can protect you," he said finally, voice steady but carrying an undertone of warning. "But protection is not free. You are destined for something. Something greater than hiding. Something they fear. Something they could never understand." Her heart twisted in response. Hope, terror, awe, and something else she hadn't yet named. She wanted to reject him, to say no, to hide forever in the cabin and let the storm rage outside without interference. But a part of her, the part that had always whispered for belonging, for understanding, for someone who could see the fire inside her, leaned forward just slightly, trembling, tentative. He shifted his weight, scanning the forest beyond the broken walls. His lips pressed into a thin line, eyes narrowing and then softening. The Alpha King was formidable, yes, but he was human in ways she could sense. Flawed, haunted, burdened, and yet unyielding. Like the storm outside, he was both danger and salvation, both fear and something she couldn't look away from. The tension in the cabin thickened, almost palpable. Every rustle of the wind, every drip of rain from the broken roof, every distant howl of wolves carried meaning now, a subtle symphony of danger, longing, and inevitability. And Luna, tiny, trembling, soaked, and terrified, felt her pulse synchronize with his. The spark between them, impossible, irrational, and undeniable, pulled at her in ways she didn't fully understand but could not resist. "You don't have to answer me now," he said, voice softer yet firm. "Not yet. But know this, hiding forever won't save you. Running won't save you. And one day you'll have to choose your power, your destiny, and maybe your mate." The words hung in the storm-soaked air, heavy and charged. Luna swallowed hard, a lump forming in her throat. She had no words to respond, no defenses left that mattered in this presence. She was caught, utterly, completely, by the pull of something far larger than herself. And in that instant the storm outside seemed to falter, the wind pausing just enough for her to hear something remarkable, the quiet beat of possibility. That perhaps even in a world that had hunted and rejected her, there existed someone who could see her truth. Someone who could understand the fire that burned in her, the power she barely controlled, the girl she was and the force she was destined to become. And so she stayed, trembling, shivering, and utterly mesmerized as the Alpha King, formidable, haunted, and impossibly close, remained on the threshold, offering salvation, danger, and the faintest glimmer of a destiny she hadn't dared imagine. If your heart is already racing, if the pull of fate and desire is catching you like the storm outside, don't turn away now. Stay. Watch. Because Luna's story has only just begun, and the fire between her and him is only the first spark of what's coming. Luna sat curled on the cabin floor, rain drumming above, her small body shivering not entirely from cold. Her mind, however, roared with memories, fragments of a past that refused to stay buried. She could feel them pressing in, each one a sharp reminder of who she was, who she had been, and the dangers that had always followed her like a shadow she could never shake. She remembered the first time her powers had shown themselves, a flicker of silver fire in her palms when she was barely 5. At first it had been exciting, a secret light she could summon at will. She had thought herself special, gifted. But that excitement didn't last long. The elders had seen it too, their faces pale with fear, eyes full of judgment, voices harsh and unforgiving. "Too dangerous," they had whispered. "Child of the silver flame. She cannot be allowed to grow among us." Even now, the memory made her stomach twist and her chest tighten. She remembered hiding under her blankets that night, hands pressed together, trying to smother the trembling sparks that escaped her fingertips. Shame had seeped into her bones, wrapping around her like a heavy cloak. Why couldn't she be ordinary? Why couldn't she just be like the other kids who ran and laughed without fear, whose hands didn't burn with power that terrified everyone around them? Her thoughts turned to the pack, to the ones who were supposed to be her family, the ones who had turned away. Their whispers, their pointed fingers, the way they crossed the circle to avoid her. It had broken something inside her that she didn't fully understand until she was alone, shivering in the night, listening to the wind whisper her name as though mocking her. Fear had become a constant companion. Not just the fear of being claimed, hunted, or punished. Fear of herself. Fear of what she could do if she lost control, if the silver fire that flickered in her veins was unleashed. She had tried to hide it, tried to pretend she was small, ordinary, harmless. But hiding didn't change the truth. And every whisper, every glance of suspicion, every step taken in the dark forest of her childhood, reminded her that she was different. And yet, even in that loneliness she had learned. She had learned to listen to the wind, to feel the heartbeat of the earth beneath her feet, to notice the smallest tremor of leaves that might signal a predator. She had learned that the world was full of danger, but it was also full of signs, subtle clues if one knew how to see them. A snapping twig. A bird frozen mid-flight. A shadow that lingered too long in the corner of her vision. It was as if the forest itself had taken her in, trained her senses, sharpened her instincts. Her powers had grown quietly, secretly, in tandem with these instincts. She could feel the life in the woods pulsing around her, almost like a language she was born to understand. It was lonely, yes, and sometimes terrifying. But it had also given her a strange sense of control, a fragile mastery over herself when everything else felt like chaos. And for a brief moment she felt capable. And then her thoughts wandered unbidden to the Alpha. To the man who had appeared in the storm, tall, commanding, and impossible. Even now, wet and shivering on the cabin floor, the memory of his presence made her stomach tighten in ways that made no sense. She didn't understand it, not fully. He was frightening. He was powerful. He carried an aura of danger, yet there was something in his eyes that felt familiar, something that spoke to her as though he had known her before she even understood herself. Fear still bubbled beneath the surface. Fear of him, fear of being seen, fear of the pull she didn't want but couldn't deny. But there was also curiosity. A strange, aching curiosity that made her heart thrum and her pulse quicken. He wasn't like the others who had turned away, who had whispered that she was too dangerous to exist. Oh, he had seen her. Really seen her. And even though the weight of his power pressed down like the storm itself, there was something else. Something like recognition. Something like hope. She remembered the brief moments when their fingers brushed as he handed her food, the faint electricity that had danced along her skin, tiny sparks responding to his presence. She had tried to pull away, to tell herself it was nothing, that she was imagining it. But deep inside she knew it was real. That spark had said something she couldn't yet name. Something she wasn't ready to face. Her mind drifted back to the nights alone, the howls of the pack echoing through the hills, the moments when she had imagined herself as someone else. Smaller, weaker, invisible, just to survive. She had learned to hide, to shrink, to make herself less because it had always been safer that way. But in the presence of the Alpha, the instincts that had kept her alive suddenly felt insufficient. She felt the stirrings of something larger, something undeniable, something that whispered to her, "You are meant for more." And yet doubt clawed at her. She was still just a child. Small. Frightened. Hidden. How could she possibly face a destiny that seemed larger than the forest, larger than the pack, larger than even the storm itself? She wanted to run, to hide, to curl up on the damp floor and pretend the world didn't exist beyond the cabin walls. But even as she thought it, the silver sparks in her hands flickered faintly, as if reminding her that she had power, and that power, dangerous as it was, could not be ignored. She thought about trust. About the Alpha, about the forest, about herself. Trust had always been a luxury she could not afford. Adults had failed her. Her pack had rejected her. Even other children had feared her. Trusting had always ended in pain, in fear, in the echo of whispers calling her dangerous, unworthy, cursed. And yet, somehow she felt the stirrings of a different possibility. Perhaps not trust entirely, not yet. But maybe, connection. Maybe, understanding. She looked at the broken windows, at the rain slicing through the gaps like silver knives, and for a moment she allowed herself to breathe, really breathe. She let herself feel the pull of the forest, the storm, the faint warmth that lingered from his presence. She let herself remember that the world was not only fear and rejection. It could be something else. Something alive. Something that could see her. Her mind drifted to the first time she had felt the pull of her silver flame, how it had erupted in her hands and frightened everyone around her. She had learned to hide it, to smother it, to pretend it didn't exist. But the truth was that the power had never left her. It had only waited. Waiting for someone or something to make her believe it could be more than a curse. And then she thought of him again. Alpha. The man who had seen her through the storm, who had looked at her not with fear, but with something heavier, deeper. He had offered protection. But he had also spoken of destiny, of power, of something larger than herself. And in those words, in that gaze, Luna felt a tremor of possibility, a whisper of hope that she had not known she could allow herself to feel. Fear and longing, terror and curiosity, shame and the first glimmers of pride, they all coexisted within her chest, a storm as violent as the one raging outside. And as she pressed her hands to her palms, feeling the faint flicker of silver fire, she realized that the story of who she was only beginning. The storm outside continued to rage, but inside the cabin, Luna began to understand something vital. That power, even when feared, was not weakness. That difference, even when rejected, was not failure. That the pull she felt toward the Alpha, toward the world she had hidden from, was not a mistake. It was a call. And somewhere deep in her chest, under the fear, under the shivering, under the pain of every whisper and every glance that had told her she didn't belong, a spark of defiance lit. A spark that whispered, "I will not be invisible. I will not be silenced. I will not be claimed without choosing. And one day, I will decide my own destiny." And in that fragile, trembling spark, the first hints of hope, of power, of connection, of what she was truly meant to be, began to take shape. The forest beyond the cabin thinned as the storm eased, replaced by an eerie silver mist that clung to the trees like whispers from another time. Luna's small feet squelched in the soaked underbrush, her hands gripping the talisman against her chest, yet she did not run. Not entirely. Not while he was with her. The Alpha walked beside her, silent, his presence like a shield, his eyes scanning the shadows, alert for danger that she could only half sense. Eventually they emerged into a clearing that seemed to exist out of time. Moonlight poured over it, pale and surreal, casting long, trembling shadows. The ground was littered with ancient stones, carved with symbols that glowed faintly, silver lines pulsing like heartbeat beneath moss and age. The air smelled of damp earth, old magic, and something older, something ancestral. Luna froze. She had never seen anything like this. The carvings, the aura, the faint vibration under her feet. It was like the ground itself hummed, alive with the memories of those who had walked here long before her. She could feel her pulse quicken, her silver flame flickering subtly, sensing the magic in the stones, recognizing a distant kinship she could not yet name. "Do you feel it?" The Alpha's voice was low, reverent, almost afraid of disturbing the quiet power around them. His hand hovered near hers, not touching, just close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from him, the tether of shared energy between them. She nodded, though her voice caught in her throat. "I think I do. But why me? Why now?" He turned his gaze on her, a mixture of something tender, something warning, and something that carried weight she did not fully comprehend. "Because you are the one they have whispered about for centuries. The one with the mark. The child of the flame. The one who was meant to rise when the old ways faltered. They didn't expect you to survive. They didn't expect you to still be here." She shook her head, trembling. "I'm just a child. I'm small. I can barely control my powers. Why me? Why not someone stronger, someone better?" The Alpha crouched slightly, lowering himself to her eye level. The moonlight caught the angles of his face, the faint scars, the shadows beneath eyes that had seen too much, and Luna's heart stuttered, part fear, part awe. Strength isn't always measured by size or skill. Power isn't only what you can wield. True power, true destiny, comes from surviving, from enduring, from daring to be more than what the world expects of you. And you, Luna, have survived. That makes you stronger than anyone who has ever walked these paths before you. A chill wind rustled through the clearing, lifting her hair, tugging at her cloak, whispering through the carved stones. Luna shivered, part from cold, part from the weight of the words. She could hear faint echoes in the wind, soft, mournful howls, the ancestral calls of wolves long gone, spirits reaching through time to mark her, to call her forth. Her silver flame stirred again, responding to the energy, flickering in faint pulses, as if the stones themselves were acknowledging her presence. "You are tied to this place, to this power," the Alpha continued, voice hushed yet commanding. "It has always been waiting for you. The prophecy, the rituals, the pacts, the clans, everything you've been told to fear, everything that chased you, it all leads here to you." Luna's chest tightened. She wanted to run. She wanted to curl into herself and pretend she had no significance, no importance, no destiny thrust upon her. She wanted to hide. But some invisible tether, some magnetic pull held her there. Not just the pull of him beside her. The pull of purpose, of inevitability, of something she could not yet comprehend. "What if I fail?" she whispered, her voice trembling. "What if I can't? What if we destroy everything instead?" He reached a hand, just barely brushing hers, and the contact sent a jolt through her that had nothing to do with fear. "Then you will learn. You will grow. You will rise. The fire inside you, it isn't just destruction. It's creation. It's life. It's the power that can tip the balance between ruin and salvation. And you are its keeper." Luna's eyes drifted to the carvings again. She could almost see them move beneath the moonlight, subtle shadows shifting, forming shapes that felt alive, stories etched in stone by hands long dead. There were wolves, yes, but also humans, figures draped in fire, spirits that looked both maternal and terrifying. They called to her, a language older than any tongue she had heard. She shivered and for the first time felt the pull not just of fear but of belonging. The packs, the clans, she said, her voice soft. All those rituals, the mating bonds, the rules. Why do they all revolve around something I don't even understand? He exhaled slowly, gaze never leaving hers. Because you are the fulcrum, Luna. Everything revolves around the balance you were born to restore. Or disrupt. Forbidden mating rituals, ancient bloodlines, the old prophecies. They feared you before they even knew you could walk. And now here you are. Alone, yes, but not abandoned. Not entirely. A silence fell between them, not empty but alive, thrumming with power. The forest itself seemed to hold its breath. The moonlight reflected off her silver sparks, small and uncertain yet undeniably real. She could feel them resonate with the carvings, as though acknowledging a hidden truth she had only just begun to glimpse. And the mark, she asked finally, almost in a whisper. The one you said I carry, what does it mean? Why is it important? He let his hand hover near hers, the tension almost unbearable, the energy between them thick and palpable. It marks you as chosen. It marks you as fireborn. It is the reason they feared you, the reason they wanted to keep you hidden, the reason your life has been complicated, dangerous, full of trials. But it also marks you as someone who can change the world. Someone who can choose not just survival but triumph. Someone who can lead, or save, or destroy. And the choice as always will be yours. Luna's mind spun. Her chest felt tight, lungs trembling, heartbeat hammering. All the whispers of the past, the pack that rejected her, the nights alone, the fear, the shame, clashed violently with this new revelation. She was powerful. She was destined. She was chosen. And yet she felt small, fragile, insignificant, overwhelmed by the enormity of the prophecy she could barely begin to understand. And still the pull of the Alpha remained. His presence was magnetic, grounding, terrifying, and protective all at once. She couldn't explain why, but she felt safe. Not the naive safety of childhood, of someone shielding her from pain, but the kind of safety that acknowledged danger, fear, and power and yet promised that she was not alone. The constellations above, he said softly, eyes tracing the night sky, have aligned this night as they have not in a century. The spirits are restless. The ancestors are awake. They howl not in warning but in anticipation. You have felt it, haven't you? The pull of destiny, the whisper of your blood, the resonance of your power with the world itself. She nodded, unable to speak. He felt it. The way the wind danced across her skin, the way the carvings seemed to glow more intensely when her fingers hovered near them, the way distant howls seemed almost familiar, almost protective. It was frightening, overwhelming, yet mesmerizing. You are the spark, he continued, voice low, reverent. The balance, the fulcrum, the fire they feared. And one day, you will choose. The path will not be easy. The trials will come. The enemies will rise. But you are not like the others. You are the flame, Luna. And the world, in ways you cannot yet imagine, is waiting for it to burn. Her small hands trembled as she pressed them to the carvings, feeling the hum beneath her palms. For the first time she understood, truly understood, that she was not a mistake. He was not a curse. He was not powerless. He was essential. And in that realization, amidst the ancient stones, the whispering forest, the silver mist, and the protective magnetic presence of the Alpha beside her, Luna felt something she had never felt before. Possibility. Not certainty. Not safety. But possibility. A tremor of excitement, fear, and wonder coursed through her. The myth, the prophecy, the destiny, it was real. It was hers. And she was standing at the threshold of a world she had never dared imagine, yet had always secretly yearned for. The Alpha extended a hand, not commanding, not demanding, but inviting. A gesture that spoke of trust, of choice, of something far more profound than fear or survival. Luna's fingers hovered just above his. The magnetic pull of their connection, the weight of the prophecy, the hum of the ancient stones beneath her, and the stirring of the silver flame in her palms all combined into a moment that seemed suspended outside of time. And Luna, trembling, soaked, terrified, and infinitely alive, realized that she could no longer hide. The story of the child of the flame had begun. The forest whispered. The ancestors watched. The moon shone down like a witness to the birth of something extraordinary. And Luna, at once small and immense, fragile and powerful, terrified and exhilarated, took the first step toward a destiny that would change everything. The moon had risen higher now, silver light filtering through the mist in fractured beams that danced across the forest floor. Luna's small hands pressed to her chest, her breath shallow, her pulse pounding so violently it almost drowned out the distant sounds of movement. Something was coming. She could feel it in her bones, in the way the wind shifted unnaturally through the trees, the way the shadows moved too quickly, too deliberately. The Alpha's hand found hers without asking, grounding her, anchoring her, a silent promise that he would not let her face the danger alone. His eyes, usually so controlled, were narrowed, scanning, calculating. Every muscle in his body was taut, ready to spring, to defend, to fight. Luna felt the tremor of his energy beneath her palm, a deep, thrumming pulse that sent a shiver down her spine. She had never been this close to someone so alive, so dangerous, yet so protective. And she knew with a quiet, irrational certainty that he would give everything to keep her safe. The first signs of the threat were subtle. A whisper of movement in the shadows, a rustling that did not belong to the wind. Then came the scent, strong, metallic, foreign yet vaguely familiar. Other wolves. Not just any wolves. Alphas from a rival pack, exiled council enforcers, and perhaps shadow beasts bred of old magic, creatures meant to test, to punish, to hunt. Luna's stomach coiled with terror. She wanted to run, wanted to vanish into the forest, wanted to pretend she didn't exist. But she couldn't. Not now. Not with him. The Alpha crouched slightly, hands still holding hers, voice low but sharp. Stay close. Do not try to fight unless I say so. Trust me, Luna. Trust your instincts. She nodded, though the words barely registered. Her mind was a chaotic swirl of fear, anticipation, and a strange, fierce thrill. The silver flame in her palms flickered in response to the danger, small sparks dancing like lightning in the dark, a warning that her power would not remain dormant for long. She could feel the tension in the air, each heartbeat, each breath, each step loaded with the weight of what was to come. And then they appeared. Figures emerging from the shadows, moving with unnatural precision, eyes glinting in the moonlight. Rival alphas, their muscles coiled and lethal, faces carved with anger and suspicion. Wolves twisted in shapes not fully natural, shadow beasts that slithered and prowled, snarling in whispers that made her skin crawl. Luna's breath hitched, but the Alpha's presence steadied her, a constant anchor in the storm of fear. Leave, one of the Alphas said, voice deep and commanding, echoing through the mist like a warning shot. This girl does not belong here. You know the rules. Choose your pack or face the consequences. The Alpha's jaw tightened. He did not step back, did not release her hand. She stays. And you will learn respect, or you will leave beaten and ashamed. His words were steel wrapped in fire. They carried authority, but also a subtle edge of vulnerability, the kind only someone who had carried the weight of impossible choices could summon. Luna felt herself tremble. The danger was real. She could smell it, taste it, feel it crawling along her skin. Her instincts screamed at her to flee, yet she stayed rooted, hands still in his, heart hammering, every nerve alight. She realized then that she could not remain passive. Something inside her, a spark, a flicker, a fragment of silver flame, refused to be insignificant any longer. The first clash erupted with barely a warning. Shadow beasts lunged with teeth and claws, rival alphas charged with furious roars. The forest became chaos incarnate, moonlight slicing through branches as bodies collided, snarls ripping through the mist. Luna was yanked to the ground by the Alpha, rolled behind a fallen tree just as a massive wolf leapt over the clearing, teeth bared. Heart racing, hands trembling, she felt the first taste of fear and adrenaline mingling, sharpening her senses. The Alpha moved with lethal precision, yet never lost sight of her. Every swing, every strike, every growl was measured, protecting her, teaching her without words that she had to stay alert, had to feel, had to respond. Luna's silver flame flickered violently as instinct and power collided, tiny sparks flying from her hands as she instinctively touched the bark of a tree, causing it to burn faintly, startling a shadow beast into retreat. The moment passed as quickly as it had come, but it changed something inside her. She was not powerless. She could fight in her own way, and she would not be a victim again. One of the rival alphas snarled, stepping closer to her position, his eyes sharp and accusing. "Step aside, girl. You are nothing but a child playing with fire you cannot control." Luna's stomach twisted, and yet she felt an unfamiliar defiance rise. Something inside her refused to bow to fear or intimidation. The Alpha's gaze met hers across the clearing, a silent challenge. "Trust yourself." And she did somehow. She focused, flicked her fingers, and the small silver sparks danced along the edge of the tree, forming a blinding brief flare that made the attacker hesitate. Her heart pounded so violently it felt as though the forest itself could hear it, could feel the surge of her growing power, her refusal to remain a victim. The Alpha moved to intercept, protecting her, but even he noticed it. The spark of courage, the shimmer of ability that had been dormant, hidden, feared. He allowed himself a fraction of a smile beneath the tension, a silent acknowledgement of her growth, even as chaos continued to rip through the clearing. They ran then, weaving through the mist-laden forest, shadow beasts snapping behind them, rival alphas in relentless pursuit. Luna's breath came in ragged gasps, lungs burning, muscles straining, yet every step made her stronger, sharper, more aware of the subtle movements of the forest and the bond she shared with the Alpha. She could feel his presence guiding her, protective yet not controlling, and the pull of their connection tightened. It was magnetic, terrifying, exhilarating. And then a sharp voice cut through the chaos, echoing through the trees. "He has chosen poorly. Choose your pack, Alpha, or lose everything you claim to protect." Luna's stomach sank. She felt the weight of the world pressing down, the sense that their choices were no longer simply theirs. The Alpha's jaw clenched, and for a heartbeat she saw the uncertainty behind the command, the pressure of responsibility that had nothing to do with her yet everything to do with her safety. They paused in a narrow ravine, shadow beasts snarling at the edges, rival alphas circling, the forest itself tense and expectant. Luna pressed against the Alpha's side, trembling, heart hammering, yet inside a quiet vow formed, small but unyielding. "I will not be powerless again. I will not let fear define me. I will fight. I will survive. And one day, they will remember my name." The Alpha's gaze softened briefly, locking onto hers. No words were exchanged, but the weight of trust, of protection, of unspoken connection passed between them. Luna realized then that even in the chaos, even in the danger, even as the forest seemed to conspire against them, she was not alone. And for the first time in her short life, she did not want to be. The clash surged again, louder, faster, more ferocious, and they ran. Shadows leapt, claws tore, but Luna felt the first spark of control, of purpose, of her power answering the call of danger rather than fleeing from it. Each step, each heartbeat, each pulse of silver flame brought her closer to understanding something profound. She could face the world and perhaps even change it. And as the mist swirled around them, the Alpha's hand gripping hers tightly, the first lesson of the world's cruelty and unpredictability etched into her bones, Luna understood the truth of what they faced. The world would fight back. It would test her. It would threaten everything she held dear. But she was ready to rise. Even if the cost was everything she thought she knew about herself. The forest had settled into a hush, broken only by the gentle sigh of wind through ancient trees. Somewhere, a stream whispered over stones worn smooth with centuries of passage. Luna and the Alpha had taken refuge in a cave carved into the side of a hill, hidden from the prying eyes of the forest, from rival packs, and from the restless, shadowed forces that always seemed to hunt her. The cave smelled of earth and old stone, faintly of moss and strangely of smoke. A fire crackled in a shallow pit near the entrance, its orange glow warm against the damp chill that clung to her skin. Luna pressed her palms to her knees, shivering slightly, the adrenaline of the previous chase slowly draining from her body. The silver flame flickered faintly in her hands, responding to the fire's warmth, as though acknowledging a kinship she could feel but could not yet name. She had not spoken since the chaos ended. Words seemed inadequate. Fear had left her drained, yet the lingering terror of pursuit made her alert, senses sharp, ears twitching at every drip of water, every rustle in the distant shadows. The Alpha knelt opposite her, tending to the cuts and bruises that marred her arms and legs. He moved with quiet precision, his fingers deft yet gentle, the strength in his hands tempered by care. Luna watched him, unable to tear her eyes away. There was something in the way he moved, in the subtle lines of his face as he concentrated, that made her heart beat unevenly. She felt exposed in ways that had nothing to do with fear. Her body hurt, yes, but the vulnerability he witnessed was deeper, internal, and somehow sacred. "Does it hurt?" he asked, voice low, carrying the weight of concern without pity. Luna hesitated. "A little," she admitted, though her pride whispered that she should say nothing. She had always been told that showing weakness was dangerous, that it made her a target. Yet here with him saying it felt different. Safe in a way she could scarcely define. He nodded, not judging, not lecturing. He merely applied the salve, his fingers brushing hers. The touch was electric, brief, yet enough to make her skin prickle, to make her pulse leap. "Good," he murmured. "The wounds will heal. But not as fast as the rest. The fear, the memories, the doubt. That will take longer." She looked down at her hands, feeling the heat of the fire, the ghost of his touch lingering. "Do you ever stop being afraid?" she whispered. The question surprised her as much as it startled him. She had rarely, if ever, spoken of fear to anyone. The Alpha's gaze softened, distant as if recalling a memory too painful to speak aloud. "No," he admitted finally. "Fear is part of being alive, part of surviving. But you learn to move forward despite it. That's the difference between running and standing your ground. Between hiding in the shadows and stepping into the fire even when it might burn you." Luna felt a flicker of something unfamiliar. Hope, perhaps, or maybe the first tendrils of trust. She wanted to believe him, wanted to imagine that she could stand beside him, not behind, not cowering, but present, capable, part of something larger than herself. Her silver flame pulsed softly in response, and she did not fight it. "Tell me about your past," she said quietly, almost afraid of the answer. "About before me, before this." He paused, studying her, eyes narrowed, weighed down by memories. "There were losses," he began slowly. "People I couldn't save. Wolves I swore to protect. Failed. Mistakes I can't undo. And the choices I made, some necessary, some I wish I could erase. That is the burden of leadership, Luna. The cost of being what I am." His voice wavered ever so slightly, betraying a vulnerability that few had witnessed, and Luna felt her chest tighten. She wanted to comfort him, to reach out, but words felt small, inadequate. "I understand," she said softly. I've been abandoned. Rejected. Feared. People have tried to control me, to hide me, to keep me small because they were afraid of what I might become." Her words trembled, raw with honesty, and for the first time in her life she said them aloud. She did not flinch when he heard. He nodded, slowly, absorbing her confession without judgment. "Then you understand," he murmured. "Fear, it binds them, not you. It does not own you. And the fact that you have survived it all, fleeing, hiding, protecting what little of yourself you could, is proof that you are extraordinary." The cave seemed to shrink around them, the crackle of the fire filling the silence between their confessions. Luna's gaze lifted to his, and for the first time she noticed the depth in his eyes, the way they held both darkness and light, grief and hope, fire and water. And without knowing why, without understanding the pull entirely, she felt drawn to him, heart and soul, in ways she could not articulate. Their hands brushed again, this time deliberately, fingers entwining almost instinctively. The contact was brief but intimate, charged with an electricity neither could ignore. Her pulse thudded painfully in her chest, and she realized, with a mix of panic and longing, that she wanted more contact, more understanding, more of the closeness that was terrifying in its intensity. "I see you," he said suddenly, voice low, husky, carrying weight that made her stomach flutter. "All of you. The fear, the strength, the fire you try to hide. I see it, Luna. All of it." The words made her shiver. Not from cold, not from fear, but from the raw vulnerability they conveyed. She wanted to retreat, to deny it, to remind herself that she was just a child hiding in a dangerous world. But instead she leaned slightly toward him, drawn by the undeniable pull of something that felt bigger than both of them. "Do you trust me?" he asked softly, almost a whisper against the roar of the distant forest, the whisper of the wind through the cave entrance. Luna hesitated. Trust was a foreign concept. She had been burned, hunted, rejected, and the thought of opening herself fully terrified her. But the fear of staying closed, of remaining alone, seemed heavier. She exhaled slowly, letting the tension drain from her shoulders, even as the fire's warmth danced over her skin. "I want to," she admitted, voice trembling. "But I don't know if I can." "That's all I ask," he said. wanting to try. That's the start. They stayed in silence then, the fire crackling between them, shadows dancing along the cave walls like spirits bearing witness. Luna felt the pull of connection strengthen, subtle yet undeniable, as if her silver flame recognized the bond forming between them. She had never known companionship like this, never felt safety mingled with desire, never sensed trust so fragile yet potent. A soft sigh escaped him. There will be time to explore, to understand, to test the limits of our connection. But for now, know this: you are not alone. Not while I breathe, not while I draw a single step beside you. And I will not let them, none of them, hurt you. Not if I can help it. Luna's heart thudded painfully, her chest rising and falling with relief and fear, desire and uncertainty. She wanted to believe him. She wanted to let herself lean into this trust, into this closeness, into this strange, powerful connection. She wanted to allow herself to feel more than fear, more than survival, more than doubt. But just as the moment seemed poised to stretch into something tender, intimate, a distant rustle of movement reminded her. Danger never rested. The forest beyond the cave was still alive with shadows, enemies, rivals, threats unseen. The moment of trust, hung suspended in the air, fragile, electric, waiting to be interrupted. And in that pause, that tension, that heartbeat between moments, Luna realized something essential. Trusting did not mean surrendering. It meant daring. Daring to reach beyond fear, to accept connection, to recognize that even in a world that hunted her, even in a life marked by prophecy and danger, she could still choose, even briefly, to feel safe, to feel seen, to feel alive. The Alpha's gaze held hers, steady, unwavering, and she felt the pull of the bond tighten, magnetic, inescapable, thrilling. I see you, he repeated, softer this time, almost a vow, almost a plea. And she understood. Seeing her, truly seeing her, was both an offering and a challenge. And Luna, trembling, wounded, and filled with a fragile spark of hope, realized that for the first time in her short, turbulent life she was not running. She was standing. Not just beside him but within herself. The sun had begun its slow descent, the sky turning a bruised purple, streaked with fiery gold that seemed too beautiful for the darkness creeping over Luna's world. She had followed the Alpha into the heart of his pack's territory, a place that felt simultaneously like sanctuary and cage. She had believed, foolishly, that trust, fragile, tentative, delicate, was enough to shield her. That belief shattered in the instant the council arrived. They came without warning, emerging from the shadows of the ancient hull, their robes whispering against the stone floor, eyes sharp and merciless. Luna froze, the warmth of the Alpha's hand suddenly inadequate, insufficient, a hollow comfort against the storm closing in around her. Her heart pounded in her chest, each beat a drum of panic, confusion, disbelief. How had they found her? How had her secret, her true identity, her bloodline, her fire, been exposed? The destroyer, one of the council elders hissed, voice slicing through the hall like ice. The child of silver flame. She walks among us, pretending, hiding, daring to exist while danger festers in her wake. She cannot be allowed to live unchecked. Luna's breath caught, a sob threatening, her chest tightening with betrayal so sharp it felt like knives against her ribs. She had trusted. She had dared to believe someone, anyone, might see her as more than a weapon, more than a threat, more than the mistake everyone else feared. And yet here it was. Public denouncement, the weight of centuries of fear and superstition aimed at her fragile shoulders. The Alpha stepped forward, his presence a wall between her and the council, yet even he faltered. His jaw tightened, his usually steady eyes flickering with conflict. Duty wrestled with desire, responsibility with the pull of his heart. Luna could feel it, the tension coiling around him like a storm on the horizon ready to break. She is not what you think, he began, voice firm but strained. She. Enough. Another elder barked, their authority absolute, silencing the Alpha mid-word. You have blinded yourself with attachment. She's a threat. Her power is untested, unpredictable, and she will destroy all you have built if left unchecked. Cast her out. Now. Luna's stomach lurched. Her hands trembled, fingers curling into fists. The small sparks of silver flame she had learned to contain flickered, responding to her emotional storm. A single thought, almost subconscious, escaped. I am not weak. I am not what they fear. To me. A flicker of heat ran through her palms, a pulse that resonated in her bones, igniting something deep and ancient, something the council had never seen and never wanted to understand. The air shimmered, faint silver sparks leaping from her fingertips to the stone floor, dancing like embers caught in an invisible wind. Whispers of awe, or was it fear, passed through the gathered council. Some stepped back instinctively, a tangible hesitation in their movements. The Alpha's eyes widened in shock, concern, and an unspoken warning, but Luna did not stop. The surge of her latent power demanded release, demanded acknowledgement. She could feel the energy swirling, responding to her rage, to the betrayal, to the injustice of being called something she was not. Her voice rose, trembling with fury and pain. I am not your destroyer. I am not your weapon. I am me. A council elder's eyes flared with alarm as sparks leapt dangerously from her hands, snaring the tips of robes, igniting threads in tiny bursts of silver flame. Panic spread among the assembly. The Alpha's hand shot toward her, but she shook it off instinctively. This was hers. This was her power, her truth, her declaration. You see, she hissed, voice low but cutting. I am more than you feared. I am more than you dared imagine. And if you do not step back, you will learn what that means. The chamber erupted into chaos. Wolves lunged to restrain her, but the silver flames danced along the edges of the hall, flashing like lightning across stone and wood, illuminating her face with wild, fierce beauty. She moved instinctively, ducking and weaving, not to escape but to claim space, to assert existence. Every heartbeat pulsed with fire, with purpose, with the knowledge that she was no longer a passive observer of her destiny. The Alpha shouted her name, voice breaking through the clamor, pleading, warning, urging. Luna. Control it. Please. But she could not. Not yet. Not while betrayal still burned through her chest. Her power was raw, untamed, responding to emotion, to injustice, to the betrayal that carved itself into her soul. And in that moment, enemies became witnesses to the force they had feared for centuries. Even the Alpha stepped back slightly, awe and terror warring across his features. A shadow elder, the one who had orchestrated her exposure, attempted to advance, eyes narrowed, hand raised in command. Luna's silver flames arced toward him, a whip of light and heat that forced him to stumble back, robes smoldering. Do not come near me, she spat, voice trembling with fury and authority. Do not ever presume to control me again. The Alpha moved closer, careful, protective, trying to ground her, to remind her, to reach her without restraining her. His hand found hers again, fingers entwining, and she did not resist. But her eyes, wide, burning, alive, did not soften. She had tasted betrayal, and the fire within her demanded respect, demanded recognition, demanded survival on her own terms. You cannot stay, the Alpha murmured, voice low, a tremor of fear and heartbreak threading his words. They will not forgive. They will not stop. You must run. Now. Luna's chest heaved. Rage, sorrow, and exhilaration surged together. She had been hunted, humiliated, and denounced, yet for the first time she felt truly alive. The silver flames pulsed fiercely along her arms, then along her spine, coiling like serpents of light. I will not be powerless, she whispered almost to herself, a vow that trembled in the firelight and echoed in the chamber. Not ever again. And then she ran. Not away from the Alpha, not away from trust, not away from herself, but into the unknown, fully, without hesitation. The hall erupted behind her. The council shouted, wolves chased, chaos reigning, but she did not falter. The silver flames leapt from her hands, illuminating the path, carving a trail through shadow and fear. With every step she tasted her own strength, her own autonomy, the raw thrill of power no one could take from her. The Alpha's voice followed, calling, pleading, but she did not stop. Rage had sharpened her instincts, honed her focus. She leapt over debris, ducked beneath fallen beams, felt the wind in her hair, smelled the smoke in the forest beyond. Her body moved with precision and wildness she had never known, every sinew and nerve responding to the fire within. And as the forest swallowed her, as the council's shouts faded, as the Alpha's hand lingered on the cave entrance where she had fled, Luna understood one undeniable truth. Betrayal had unlocked her. She was no longer hiding. She was no longer small. She was fire incarnate, silver and untamed, and the world would never forget her again. The forest had become a living, breathing entity, pulsing with anticipation, charged with the tension of what was to come. Luna ran with a purpose now, no longer a frightened child, no longer fleeing shadows and whispers. The silver flames that had danced timidly across her hands before now roared with life, streaks of light arching through the night, trailing her like comets set free from the chains of fear. The ritual site awaited, and she could see it in the distance. A circle of ancient stones etched with runes that glowed faintly in the moonlight, their power resonating with her own. Wolves from both packs had gathered, shapes flickering in the shadows, eyes shining with suspicion, curiosity and fear. Rival alphas crouched at the edges, muscles coiled, ready to strike, to assert dominance over the girl who dared defy centuries of expectation. Her lungs burned from running, but adrenaline and the heat of her silver flame kept her moving. Every heartbeat was a drum of war and defiance, each breath a defiance against the label that had been forced upon her: destroyer. She would not be anyone's sacrifice, anyone's pawn, anyone's cautionary tale. She was not a weapon to be wielded, she was the force itself. The alpha fell into stride beside her, moving silently yet powerfully, protective instinct flaring as he scanned the perimeter. His eyes flicked constantly between her and the encroaching danger, muscles tense, ready to shield, ready to strike. "Luna, whatever you do, control it," he whispered, voice low, urgent. "They will try to use your power against you if you lose focus." Her lips pressed into a thin line, jaw set, silver flames licking higher around her hands. "I won't be controlled. Not by them. Not by anyone," she hissed, her voice trembling with fury and determination. The words felt like a spell cast into the night, a declaration that would not be ignored. As they neared the ritual site, the ground beneath their feet began to tremble. Small stones vibrated and rolled. Roots twisted unnaturally, like the forest itself recognized the rising tide of her power. The runes on the stones pulsed brighter in response, the air thick with the hum of supernatural energy. Luna could feel the whispers of the ancestors, voices threading through her mind, guiding, urging, warning. "Claim what is yours. And do not yield." A rival alpha stepped forward, eyes blazing, teeth bared. "Step back, girl," he growled. "You are not meant to interfere. The pack's power belongs to those who earned it, not to a fledgling child hiding behind sparks." Luna's chest rose and fell with steadying breaths. Rage fused with clarity. She lifted her hands and the silver flame expanded, a roaring beacon that illuminated her surroundings, casting shadows that danced like spirits on the edges of the ancient stones. "I am not hiding," she said, voice strong and unwavering. "I am here. I am mine. And I will not be sacrificed to your fear." The alpha glanced at her, awe and pride mingling in his expression. He had seen glimpses before, moments of raw, untamed power, but this was her fully claimed. Her energy surged outward, responding to every beat of her heart, every flicker of emotion, coiling around her like a living aura. The rival alpha lunged, claws extended, teeth bared. But Luna was faster, fluid, precise. Sparks of silver lit the night as she sidestepped, her movement a dance between instinct and raw power. The ground shook with each step, the earth responding to her presence, roots writhing, stones levitating slightly as though acknowledging her claim over them. She could hear the whispers of the ancestors growing louder, echoing through her mind. "Your fire is yours alone. Use it. Protect it. Do not falter." And she did not. The silver flame surged, coiling into her body, filling her lungs, coursing through her veins, until a sensation beyond fear and adrenaline overtook her: clarity, strength, absolute dominion over her own power. The alpha moved to block an attack from another rival, his form a shadowed silhouette against the blazing light of Luna's silver flames. Their connection, previously subtle, now felt like an unbroken tether of energy, hearts and instincts aligned. He did not question her power. He stood beside her, not above, not behind, but equal in determination, in defiance, in recognition of her sovereignty. Then it happened, she shifted. The transformation was both graceful and terrifying. Silver fur erupted across her form, sleek and radiant under the moonlight, muscles rippling with controlled power. Her eyes glowed like molten silver, pupils narrowed, senses sharp, heightened beyond comprehension. The flames danced along her fur, a living extension of her spirit, her defiance, her fury. The forest screamed in response. Trees groaned, roots surged upward, stones vibrated and hummed with energy. Wolves recoiled instinctively, some with fear, some with awe, recognizing the majesty and danger in her fully realized form. Luna's voice echoed, both human and otherworldly, a resonant command that carried across the sight. I am not your sacrifice. I am the flame you cannot contain. Rival alphas froze. The council elders staggered back, robes singed where sparks leapt too close, eyes wide with disbelief. They had feared her power, yes, but they had never imagined her mastery. Never imagined the force of her fully claimed essence. The alpha at her side did not falter. He matched her in calm resolve, his form tense yet grounded. Luna, he murmured, almost in awe, almost a prayer. This is yours. Do not let them take it from you. And so she moved. Every step sent shockwaves through the ground. Every growl, every roar, reverberated with authority and defiance. The energy around her thickened, a tangible aura that altered the environment. Stones glowing, wind whipping in violent currents, the remnants of the ritual site trembling. A rival dared to strike, but Luna's claws, imbued with silver flame, cut through shadow and malice effortlessly. The battle was chaotic, fierce, yet every move she made was deliberate, controlled, precise. She was not a child lost in chaos. She was the storm. She was the fire. She was herself, fully, completely, irreversibly. And as the last of the rivals hesitated, fear eclipsing their arrogance, Luna rose tall, chest heaving, silver fur glowing, flames dancing along the tips of her claws. Her eyes swept across the battlefield, locking briefly with the alphas. In that glance there was no question, no hesitation, no apology, only understanding, respect, and the recognition of bond forged through trials, danger, and shared defiance. The ground trembled beneath them, the runes on the stones shining brighter than ever, as if the very earth acknowledged her ascendance. A distant rumble echoed through the forest, a warning, a promise that the world had shifted, and nothing, no council, no rival, no fear, would ever see her the same way again. And yet, even in triumph, a tension lingered. A shadow remained on the horizon, a whisper carried on the wind, a voice that promised challenges yet unseen. Luna's chest rose and fell, fire crackling along her fur, and she knew deep in the marrow of her bones that claiming this power was only the beginning. The confrontation had ended, for now, but the war for her destiny was far from over. The alpha stepped closer, their forms nearly touching, energy mingling like two storms colliding yet harmonizing. Are you ready? He asked, voice low but steady, hand brushing hers, silver flames licking the edges of their connection. Luna's eyes glinted, reflecting fire and moonlight. I am, she breathed. I am not your sacrifice. I am the flame. And I will not be tamed. The forest fell silent, the only sound the crackling of her silver flames, the wind whispering through ancient trees, and the distant pulse of destiny calling them both forward. The battlefield fell silent, yet the silence was far from peaceful. Luna's chest heaved, silver flames flickering gently along her fur as if the world itself waited on her next move. The alpha stood close, his presence grounding her, yet the tension between them and the watching eyes of the forest, the council and rival wolves remained palpable. Every shadow seemed alive with anticipation, every breeze carrying whispers of judgment and wonder. Luna lowered her claws slightly, yet her aura did not dim. The power she had claimed was hers, undeniable and unbroken, yet a storm brewed within her heart. She had defended herself, her bond, her very existence, but at what cost? Friends, or foes, had witnessed the force of a girl who should have been powerless. The whispers would spread. Fear would follow. And she would be forced to make a choice time and again between mercy and survival, trust and self-preservation. Would you have chosen her if you had been there? Seen the fire dancing across her fingertips, felt the tremor of the earth beneath your feet as she shifted into something magnificent, something dangerous? Would you have stood with her, believing in the purity of her heart, the rightful strength of her spirit? Or would you have turned away, letting fear dictate your actions, leaving her to face the world alone, a girl cursed with too much fire? Her eyes scanned the forest, the faces of wolves and humans alike reflecting shock, fear, awe, and doubt. Every one of them questioned the same thing. And she questioned herself. Was she a hero, a savior, someone whose destiny could alter the fates of packs and clans alike? Or was she simply a child marked by powers too vast, too misunderstood, too terrifying for anyone to love or trust? The Alpha's hand brushed against hers again, a reminder that someone could see her, really see her, and not recoil. "I see you," he murmured, voice low and steady. "All of you. Every part you hide. Every part you fear." And yet, even in his affirmation, the weight of the world pressed down upon her shoulders. Every choice, every flicker of her flame, every beat of her heart carried consequences far beyond herself. Could she ever truly trust, or would every ally eventually become an enemy? Could she love, or would passion ignite ruin? A distant howl punctuated the night, sharp and haunting, as if the forest itself asked the question. Where do you stand? Will you fight with her or flee in terror? Luna felt the tremor through the ground, through her bones, through the very pulse of her being. She raised her head, silver flames flickering brighter as though calling the world to witness her resolve. "Choose," she whispered to the night, more to herself than anyone else. "Choose the side of the girl who refuses to be broken, who refuses to be silenced, who refuses to be sacrificed." And in that moment the world seemed to hold its breath. The Alpha mirrored her gaze, respect and admiration reflected in his eyes. Wolves shifted uneasily, council members muttered, enemies reconsidered. Everything paused, waiting for someone, anyone, to decide if they would stand or turn their backs and let the girl walk alone. The flames around her hands flickered once, twice, then roared higher, illuminating every leaf, every stone, every creature in a silver glow. And Luna smiled, a fleeting curve of determination, defiance and hope. "If you choose me," her eyes seemed to say, "I will not falter. I will not fail. But if you do not, remember this flame, remember this night, for it is only the beginning." A hush fell over the forest. The tension was palpable, every heartbeat synchronized with the crackling of her silver fire. And then, just as the shadows began to inch forward, Luna's voice, human and otherworldly all at once, echoed across the clearing. "Will you stand with me, or will you fear me?" Her words hung in the air like smoke, curling and twisting through the trees, leaving the world to decide. And now, dear listener, here is your choice too. If this story lit something deep inside you, if the fire of Luna's courage, her defiance, her raw, untamed power stirs your heart, then join us. Subscribe to Anne's Romance Collections, where tales that burn, tales that linger long after the last word, are always waiting. Here, every story pulls you into another world, into another heartbeat, into another life. Stand with Luna. Witness the flame. Feel it. And let your heart burn. The battlefield faded behind them, the ruins of stone and echoes of silver flame dimming into the distance. Luna walked beside the Alpha, her body still humming with energy, the warmth of the fire lingering in her bones. The night was quiet now, yet the tension remained, thick and almost tangible, curling around them like smoke. The forest seemed to hold its breath with them, every tree, every leaf, every shadow aware of the monumental shift that had just occurred. Her eyes, still glowing faintly, scanned the horizon. There was peace, temporary, fragile, but also an unsettling promise. The ground beneath their feet trembled subtly, a vibration felt more in the soul than the soles of their feet. Somewhere far in the distance, a howl rang out, resonant, powerful, claiming the night as if announcing that Luna's rise was only the first spark of something far greater. The Alpha's hand brushed against hers once more, a gesture of reassurance and connection. "The night isn't over," he said, voice low, carrying both warning and prophecy. "Not for you. Not for the world. Not for what's coming." Luna nodded, her chest rising and falling, silver flames flickering like quiet embers along her form. She had claimed her power, but the echoes of what she had unleashed stretched far beyond her sight, threading through packs, clans, and shadows waiting patiently. This was not the end. This was the beginning. From the shadows, a voice whispered, carried on the wind, low and chilling. "She is not the only one. The true Alpha hasn't risen, yet." The words slid through the trees, threading through the underbrush, curling around rocks and roots, leaving a promise and a threat entwined. Luna's ears twitched, senses heightened, she could feel it. Not clearly, not fully, but enough to know that the calm of this night was a fragile illusion, a prelude to trials that would test every ounce of her strength, courage, and heart. The Alpha squeezed her hand gently, a silent vow of solidarity. Whatever comes, he said, voice steady, prophetic even, we face it together. And we are ready. The moon hung high, silver and cold, illuminating the forest as Luna and her protector walked into the unknown. Every step carried weight, power, and the promise that destiny, though uncertain, was theirs to shape. Yet beneath the surface, beneath the confidence, an undercurrent of tension lingered. The feeling of unseen eyes watching, waiting, plotting, knowing that her journey was far from over. A final howl rose, distant yet unmistakable, the sound of a force gathering, a power ancient and patient, waiting for the moment to challenge, to test, to claim. Luna's eyes glimmered with determination, silver flames reflecting the moonlight as she lifted her chin. She would not yield. She would not be broken. She would face whatever was coming, because she was Luna, child of the flame, and her story was only beginning. And for the listener, the question remains. When the next shadow rises, will you be there to witness it? Will you stand with her? Will you feel the fire, the defiance, the heart of a girl who refused to be tamed? The story continues, the flame burns, and the world waits. Subscribe to Anne's Romance Collections now, and step into every story where love, danger, power, and destiny collide. Because here, the tales do not end, they linger, they haunt, they ignite your soul. The forest exhaled, the night held its breath, and the distant echoes of destiny whispered. This isn't over.